Right, hi everybody. Let's give it a few more minutes and just wait for some more people to join. But it's great to see everyone logging in straight away on time, which is really good to see. So well done and welcome. Hi, Colin. Can you just confirm if we're live on Facebook now?
That's correct. We're all live. Thank you.
Great stuff. Okay, we'll give it another 30 seconds and then we'll get started. Okay, let's get going. So firstly, again, another big welcome and a big thank you for making the time to join us for the fourth uh, running of this workshop and this webinar looking at Ranger competencies and welfare standards. Before we go into the actual webinar itself, just a few points. Firstly, and importantly, is on interpretation. So there's live translation for this event in French, Spanish, and Swahili. All the presentations are in English. So if you're listening in English, you just don't have to worry. You can stay put, but everybody else, please go into the interpretation button and click on the appropriate language. Make sure I've got that right. Yeah, French, Spanish, and Swahili. Secondly, there's a Q&A after the two presentations, and there's also a Q&A feature on Zoom. So please do put in any questions as they come up. Myself and Humera will do our best to get back to you as the presentation goes through, and we will be joining, so adding and presenting any questions pertinent to the speakers after their presentations as well. So please do put in there. And also, if you're looking to add anything, just please add in where you're viewing from. It's always good to know where people are in the world. I know this is Europe and Africa, but again, a real mix of countries represented, and we're all very excited to see and hear feedback from you all. So I'm going to hand over now to Chris Callis, the president of the IRF, for his opening remarks. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, John, and hello, everyone. Yeah, it's quite nice to have everyone in a very similar time zone for a change. Often our meetings are quite dispersed, but this is the third webinar in the series to raise awareness around welfare and competency standards that we've developed. I just would like to start off by saying that in terms of this region, obviously we looked at the time zone, but I think there's something else that we need to consider, and that is often people think that the challenges and issues faced by rangers in Europe and Africa are very different. Yes, we recognize there are large differences, but also at the same time there are a lot of similarities in terms of those challenges which rangers face. Today we're going to hear from representatives from each region to give insight into some of those issues, how they relate to welfare and the competency standards. So looking forward to that, and thank you to them for joining. I think what's important is to understand where this comes from. Obviously, we as IRF have been looking to improve or professionalize the ranger workforce. And this is aligned to our mission, which is to develop, advance, and promote throughout the world's community the ranger profession and its critical role in the conservation of natural and cultural resources. Importantly, we have a strategy which was highlighted at the 11th World Ranger Congress last year in France, where we also presented the IRF strategy. And in that strategy, one of the pillars is to is ranger advancement and professionalization by 2030. So this is also linked to the 30 by 30 targets, where certainly one of the things that we believe is that rangers are far more effective when they have competence in the work that they're doing, but also that their welfare needs are adequately addressed. Leading on from the World Ranger Congress, what we're doing today also fits into the HEAC Declaration, which is obviously what Rangers wanted to see. And in that, it said that we recognize that individuals and their collective needs for Rangers require support that should be addressed in an institutional context. So I think that's how this is framed, and further in terms of the competencies itself, the HEAC Declaration talks to the point of ensuring that all Rangers have access to essential technical skills and competencies aligned with global Ranger competencies, which we are presenting on today, and enabling them to perform their duties effectively, safely, and also responsibly. There's also the declaration talks to the conditions as well, ensuring that occupational safety and health of Rangers is being implemented, and also that IRF advocates for the betterment of the Ranger working conditions through the implementation and monitoring of recommendations of the State of the Ranger report. So this work links to a number of documents that the IRF has produced in recent times. And also, one must remember that these documents are important not just for Rangers, but it's very important for conservation organizations that are looking to support Rangers, and also the employers of Rangers. More recently, we've also aligned this Congress with our motion that, together with ourselves, with our URSA partners as well, submitted for the World Conservation Congress, the IUCN World Conservation Congress that's taking place in October this year. In that motion, which we request all IUCN members to support the HEAC Declaration, including the need to improve role recognition, working conditions, skills building, workforce inclusivity, and professional conduct of Rangers. So basically what we're doing is looking to share the work that's been done, hoping that the people here can share it within their spheres of influence and look to use these documents, and also to pass it on to others to ensure that it gets used well. So I'm really happy that we've got some of the experts that have been involved in this here today, and we really look forward to presenting this to everyone, and hopefully we get full value out of the time here. And I'm going to hand over back to you, John.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for that, those opening remarks. Just a quick reminder to everyone, so all the resources that we talk about today are all available on the IRF website. And Humera, thank you, just put the link up in the chat. So please, after this, it's all free to access, it's all available, and it's all there to be used. So I'm just going to hand over now to Mike Appleton, who's going to lead us through the competency section of this webinar. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, John, and hello, everybody. Thank you so much for the invitation to speak with you today. I'm here to talk about the work that's been done on the development of the global Ranger competencies for Rangers. My name's Mike Appleton. I work for an NGO called Rewild. And I'm also the Vice Chair for Capacity with the IUCN World Commission on Protected Areas. I'm just setting up my screen now, screen sharing, and I hope you can all see. If someone could give me a thumbs up or a shout that it's all working. Thank you very much, whoever that was. And I'll start right away because we have a busy schedule today. My presentation is to talk to you about the IRF Global Ranger competencies, and we're going to address 6 main things here. First of all, what do we mean by competence? Secondly, the development of the competencies with IRF. Thirdly, a look at the guidebook, the guidance which has been produced. Then some guidance on how to adapt and make use of the competence framework. And finally, a bit of information about other competencies framework that exists. So that's an overview of the presentation. And so I'm going to start off by talking a little bit about what we mean by competence. And competence is widely understood to be a combination of skills, knowledge, and attitude, as you can see from the picture. And let me put that in context for you, perhaps to do with the task of planting a tree. The skills is this ability to perform the task correctly and consistently. So can you plant the tree at the right depth, with the roots at the bottom and the leaves at the top, carefully and consistently, so the tree stands a good chance of living? Secondly, to be competent, you need knowledge. You need to know a little bit about the best techniques to use in different circumstances for tree planting, the factors that will help the tree survive, perhaps the species of tree you're using. And thirdly, you need attitude. You need to work professionally, ethically, and diligently. You need to be careful about what you do, consistent in what you do. Make sure you plant each tree in the same correct way. And if you add all of those 3 together, you can say you're a competent tree planter. So that's an understanding of a competence, what a person needs to do to complete a task to a high standard. The competence assessment, which you're all probably most familiar with, is a driving test, because everyone has to meet a standard of skills, being able to drive the car, knowledge, knowing the rules of the road, and attitude, driving hopefully considerately and safely. And anyone can pass a driving test. It doesn't matter if you're a professor or an uneducated person. The competencies are required to be a competent driver are exactly the same. So that's probably, hopefully that helps you understand what we mean by competence. Within the work of IRF, a lot has been done to develop a framework for building a professional and recognized workforce, a ranger workforce around the world. And this involves a combination of ensuring that there is the workforce is adequate in numbers, that there are good conditions for working, and you'll be hearing more about those later, that rangers work with required levels of conduct, and that rangers are competent. So our work on competencies is part of a much bigger strategy to build a professional framework for rangers, which we hope all employers, donors, countries, NGOs will follow. How did we develop the competencies? This was actually a long process. You can see the timeline here. We had an expert working group, we had webinars, several drafts, and more than 500 contributions were made from rangers in 85 countries. So this was not just dreamed up by a few of us in a room. It involved extensive consultation with the ranger sector. See, IRF had a competence framework many years ago, and that needed updating. And since that time, the work of rangers has become, in many ways, much more complex. So let's have a look inside the guide that we produced, and which, as you've already been told, is available from the IRF website. We managed to distill the number of competencies down to 38 that rangers should be able to do well. It could have been 500, but that wouldn't have been much use, would have been too complicated. And the best we could manage was 38, and they're divided into 3 groups. There are universal competencies, which we feel any ranger should have, regardless if they're a patrol ranger doing anti-poaching work or an urban ranger working with school children. Universal competencies, just 23 things that any ranger should be able to do well. In addition, we added 7 specialized competencies related to things which only some rangers do, which are quite specialized. For example, to do with law enforcement. And we also added 8 senior competencies, which are additionally relevant to rangers who have some supervision or leadership responsibility for other rangers. So it only comes down to 38. And those rangers appear in 8 categories. And you can see how they are divided there between universal, specialized, and senior. We have the ranger's workplace role and job, planning, administration, and documentation, managing and leading people, conducting practical field work, crime prevention, law enforcement, and security. And you can see that's where most of the competencies are, but not all. Interacting with stakeholders, visitation and education, and importantly, personal conduct and attributes. This is the attitude part of the competence framework. So that's just, you can't read that, but that's just a list of all of them. You can list all of these 38 competencies on one page. Let's have a look at a few individual ones to give you an idea of what they are. This is the first, this is URC1. It's the first universal competence in category A to do with the ranger's workplace and role. And it says a competent ranger should be able to describe and identify the main natural values of the area of operations and the main threats to those values. So any ranger needs to be able to tell you why where they work is important and what the main threats are. And we also have some additional information which tells you a little bit more detail about what that means. Here's another one in the crime prevention, law enforcement, and security category. Identify signs and evidence of unauthorized activity and security threats in the field and respond appropriately. So any ranger should be able to recognize problems and be able to do the right thing when faced by those problems. Of course, this is a general competence and it would have to be adapted to the specific threats and issues to the site where you are working. Here's one on administration. Prepare accurate formal and official management reports and documentation on ranger activities. Senior rangers need to be able to prepare good reports. And here's a more advanced one. A specialized one. Apply correct procedures for managing scenes of crimes and harmful activities and for managing associated evidence. Not every ranger needs to be able to do this, but a lot of rangers do. So this becomes a specialized competence in the crime prevention, law enforcement, and security category. So how should these competencies be used? First of all, these are general competencies and they're universal, and they will need to be adapted to your workplace and environment and the job that you do. You may already have a competence framework where you work, in which case you can use these competencies as a checklist to make sure that you are covering all of IRF's universal competencies. You may need to adapt them and make them more specific. For example, I was talking about knowing how to respond to threats. In some cases, a major threat might be fire, and so you would need to know firefighting procedures. In other places, a threat might be illegal gold mining, So you need to know how to deal with that. So you have to take these general competencies and adapt them to fit the job that you do. Secondly, the competencies can be used for personnel planning and management. They can help identify job descriptions. They can help with recruitment. They can help a lot with advancement and recruitment based on merit rather than other factors. In other words, they're a checklist of what good rangers should be able to do. And therefore you can track their performance. And thirdly, then use the competencies to identify where they need training and learning. And training providers can cross-check their curricula against the competencies to make sure they are covering at minimum the IRF requirements. And finally, competencies and having a competence framework tells the world that we are a profession. This isn't just a group of people employed to run around in the field. This is a structured profession, just like doctors, nurses, firefighters, which says to the world, these are the standards of competence which apply to our profession. And this helps to persuade people about just how important your work is. So to adapt the competencies, you can cross-check them and update them, as I said, and you can make your own competence framework. You don't have to follow this one precisely. You can use them to create organizational structures, job descriptions, recruitment and advancement, contracts and performance assessments. You can identify from the list the required competencies for different jobs. For example, these are the competencies required for a tourism ranger with some leadership duties. You can see that some of them are being crossed out because they're not relevant. These are the ones perhaps for a junior patrol ranger. Again, not all of them, just some of them. You can use them for training and learning. And you can use them, as I said, for advancing the profession. And in some countries, registering the ranger occupation. In some countries, there is a national register of occupation which requires a competence framework, and this can help you do that. So a summary, the IRF has produced these global 38 ranger global competencies. They can be adapted and customized. They can help with personnel planning and management, training and learning, and advancing the profession. And they can help with official recognition, merit-based recruitment and advancement, relevant training, common standards, better morale, and improved performance. You can find all the information on the IRF website, and IRF is working on guidance to use the competencies. There are other competence frameworks which you may want to refer to on all areas of protected area management, on species recovery, and on the use of SMART. That's the end of my presentation, and I think we're moving on to the next one now, and we'll have questions at the end. Thank you.
Hi, Mike. Thank you very much for that. Really appreciate that. And we will take questions. So please post them if you have them now, or we can hold them for after the next presentation. But just to remind everyone, the frameworks that Mike was talking about are on the IRF website, but they're also available in multiple languages. So if you go into the resources page on the IRF website, you can click the drop down, which then will select resources in your home language, again, and hopefully making life a bit easier for everybody. So next, we're going to move into the welfare standard. And Andrew, I believe you're starting with this. So Andrew from Game Range Association of Africa, welcome and thank you very much.
Thanks, John. Great, thanks very much, John. Yeah, welcome to everyone, and great to see you all. I hope everyone can hear me all right. yeah, I'm going to be focusing with Borja Diaz from ERF on um, the part of the presentation to do with the range of employment and working conditions. So just to start, we know that many rangers work in some appalling conditions in some areas. So the need for a standard and a global standard on this was very much needed, and it's something that's been spoken about for many years in the ranger fraternity. So if you look at the International Labour Organization, there's certain fundamental principles and rights at work for all professions, and if we wanted the ranger profession to be recognized as an international profession, we'll ensure that rangers have access to these rights at work. And some of these are included here. So, things like the elimination of discrimination in respect of employment, or the elimination of all forms of forced labor or compulsory labor, and in particular, to do with welfare standards, a safe and healthy working environment, obviously crucial to any profession. So this sort of resulted in the global standard for ranger employment and working conditions that we're going to talk about today. I'll give you a brief overview of that, and then I'm going to hand over to Borja, who will take you into some examples around some of the key aspects here, and look at some examples from Europe. And then I'll talk to some of the examples from Africa. So just, to give you a basic overview, the global standard for ranger employment and working conditions. So the idea was to establish these for rangers globally. It's obviously a mammoth undertaking because rangers, we know, work in many different environments across the world. But there are some commonalities, as Chris referred to, between these different areas. So it's designed as a universal standard, much the same as the competency framework that Mike chatted about, and we can adapt this to the different regions. And in terms of implementing this, which is always important with these, these standards, it looks at what rangers are required to do, what the ranger employers, what their role in implementation is, and then also what different government organizations and different countries, what their role is in terms of ensuring that these standards are adhered to and met. And so there's a few applications here, that these standards will be useful for. One is benchmarking, so it helps rangers themselves, ranger associations, and that would be national associations and regional associations like GRAA and ERF, governments and employers, and NGOs that work to support rangers to assess what the working conditions of their ranger teams are, and if they meet these global standards. And obviously, the key here is to try and improve standards for rangers. There's one thing having a standard, but as we look to professionalize the industry, the idea is to obviously upgrade the working conditions for rangers, towards this aspirational standard. Also provides, a way to improve advocacy. So we know that many ranger associations and the RF and regional associations work to, as advocates for the ranger profession. And so that we and you can push for better working conditions for rangers across the globe. And then policy influence, which was really important. So, promoting, different countries, different regions to protect rangers' rights in the workplace. I'm going to hand over to Borja, and he's going to take us through some of the key aspects of the code.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Well, first of all, I apologize for my horrendous accent, but I will do my best to speak clearly. I'm going to share my, okay. Can you see it? Can you see the presentation?
Yes, perfect.
Yes.
Okay, so this is a pyramid. Okay, Maslow was an American psychologist who developed the hierarchy of needs, and I made a little adaptation for rangers. So basically, this pyramid shows the different needs people have, from basic ones like food and safety to higher ones like love, self-esteem, and reaching their full potential. So people usually try to meet the lower needs before the higher ones. And I draw a line between safety and belonging, and that's what I call the thrive survive line. So if we have some gaps in the physiological and safety needs, we are barely surviving, while where we keep continuing on getting more things like belonging needs, esteem needs, and self-actualization, which is the peak of the pyramid, then we are thriving as a profession. So I will focus on safety and physiological needs. Usually these problems are like, they can be boiled down to precarious or unstable employment, lack of adequate equipment, lack of adequate training, and lack of institutional support. For this, there is a global standard for ranger employment and working conditions. And today I will be focusing on number 2, 3, 4, and 5 of these competences, working conditions, sorry. So the first one being training. All rangers should be provided regular training and adequate training following the international standards. As Mike put that like basic competences and area-related special competences. Like in this case, we have some rangers handling a seal. Of course, you need to have basic competences as a ranger, but you should have a very good knowledge about how to manage a dangerous animal like this one. Also, the training should cover rights-based training on community engagement, rules of engagement, and de-escalation techniques, especially when you have to face well, visitors and other more aggressive people as well. How to use the minimum use of force, and have a health and safety risk assessment. Like in this case, some rangers putting down a fire. Training. We believe that having rangers train fellow rangers is crucial for enhancing professionalism. Peer-to-peer trainings ensure practical knowledge, real-world experience, and shared value are passed on. And in this case, I put this mark R2R. It's something that we usually use, meaning, well, most of you know this, ranger to ranger. We believe that the experience and values are very interesting when they are shared from ranger to ranger. Okay, every ranger must have a formal contract or a statement of employment conditions, and contract should clearly define duties, responsibilities, and terms of employment. And contrary to common belief, ranger jobs in Europe are not as secure as they should be. And while many rangers are employed by governments, their job security depends on political priorities. I mean, everyone agrees on the importance of the environment for both planetary health and our own as a species. However, as we move into the details, the measures that need to be taken often fade away. In our case, we're seeing how at times the presence of rangers in protected areas are being reduced or even completely eliminated, as we have witnessed in recent times. Rangers should receive uninterrupted pay, no less than the national minimum wage, and the pay should be equivalent to other public service roles like emergency roles, and the salaries should be increased based on performance and experience. Rangers must have access to paid annual leave. If leave is not taken, wages in lieu must be provided, and any outstanding payments should be settled at the end of the contract. Rangers are often positioned at the lowest pay and status level compared to other professions in their countries. And with rising living costs, the ranger's job become increasingly unattractive unless salaries are adjusted to reflect the vital role rangers play in promoting the sustainable use of natural resources and ensuring a sustainable future. Rangers are multi-skilled professionals, law enforcers, first aiders, scientific assistants, tour guides, storytellers, and so on, and the wide range of responsibilities should be properly recognized and reflected in their salary. About harassment and discrimination at work, rangers' reproductive rights should be fully respected. All rangers should have both internal and external channels to report workplace issues. All rangers should not face discrimination in salary, training, duties, or any other work-related factors. And finally, all rangers must be safeguarded against abuse, violence, and harassment at work. Here I would like to explain what this picture is about. These are our fellow rangers from Malta, and they are doing a great job in a very, very hostile environment, and they have to face harassment and violence too many times a day. 5. Accommodation, equipment, and subsistence. Rangers should have access to adequate accommodation, facilities, and means of subsistence. Of course, equipment should be appropriate and identified in consultation with rangers. Like in this case, there are some rangers that are collecting some evidence of poaching, and since there is this avian flu around, they must carry, protective, face masks, gloves, etc., just following protocol to avoid an infection. Rangers should have access to mechanisms for registering complaints, and they should be able to report non-compliance with this requirement. So this is everything from my end, and back to you, Andrew. Caroline, please, if you could disconnect the presentation.
Thanks very much, Borja.
Thank you.
I'm just going to share my the rest of my presentation. All right, thanks, Borja. I think you'll see there's quite a bit of overlap between the different sections in this standard. I'm going to be focusing on the safety and health, so 6, 7, and 8, which is safety, health, and security at work, and then insurance and compensation for accident or injury, and labor inspection and social security. So in terms of safety, health, and security work, the standard outlines the framework for improvement and protection of the rangers' safety and health at work. And the important point here is that it looks at the consideration that many rangers work in areas with significant risk. And we know that risk is part and parcel of rangers' work, across Africa and in Europe. And we need to try and mitigate the risk that they face. So just setting out some of the roles of the states. We know many rangers work for state organizations. So this is looking at things like preparing a national policy on ranger safety and health, outlining the appropriate policies, especially around when rangers are deployed into conflict situations. And this is an ongoing discussion that we're having at the moment, especially in Africa, when we look at some of the really high conflict areas that rangers are expected to work. We're having a situation at the moment in northern Mozambique, in Niassa, where we've had at least 4 rangers killed in the last 2 weeks, with Islamic extremist groups that have entered a national park. And how do we deal with these kind of situations where rangers are expected to still carry on their conservation activities within those parks? Really important that we grapple with these issues. And then looking at, which state authority is responsible for ranger safety and health. I think ranger associations can really work in close contact with states on this. Also need to look at what employers can do. This is obviously looking at things like risk assessments. We need to understand the risk that rangers face in their areas of work. We know that it's going to be very different depending on the areas and situations that they face. We need to also look at establishing working hours, and establishing limits on working hours, because we know that if rangers are fatigued or overworked, it can increase the risks that they face. And then minimize exposure to what we call exceptional risks. This is extremely difficult in some areas. The risk factors that rangers face, as I say, vary hugely across our continent. And we can go from relatively low risk, protected and conservation areas to extremely high risk areas. So it's really important that rangers have adequate first aid and emergency support, and ensure that they understand their role and procedures of what happens in these situations where something may happen to them. And then obviously, what should rangers do themselves? So they can obviously, rangers are expected to follow health and safety measures, wear protective gear. We know we have situations where protective gear is issued, but rangers may choose not to wear it. So rangers also have a role to play in mitigating risk. And then the second point here is, withdraw from dangerous situations. So avoiding, excessively dangerous situations where possible. This is also extremely hard in practice in some areas. And I'll take you through some examples here. One is around, and I think, the training part of this framework and the, mitigating risk and health and safety risks are really closely linked here. And this was just the slides just to show the fitness routines that rangers are expected to undertake in certain areas. And this is about preparing them, the men and women expected to carry out the work there, physically preparing them for the challenge that they're going to face. When they're expected to carry out physical tasks, we need to make sure that we prepare rangers, appropriately and adequately for those tasks where they're expected to undergo these physical hardships. And really important here that we also look at preparing them mentally for the challenges that they're going to face. Also, when we look at health and safety, like in Europe and many other areas that rangers work at, it's not only the risks that they face from armed conflicts. We also need to look at environmental risks, and this is becoming even more noticeable due to climate change and things like this. But fire management across Africa in certain environments is a really high risk factor for rangers. We know we've lost rangers in the past in these due to runaway wildfires, and we know in other continents it is also a massive problem. So we need to make sure the rangers have the right safety gear, that they have the right training, and that they are mentally and physically equipped to deal with the risks that they're going to face. The same applies for rangers working in areas with what we'd call dangerous game or wildlife. This is an example of a ranger on patrol to monitor black rhino in northern Zululand, and this can be extremely dangerous. These animals are unpredictable, and rangers need to be trained in how to approach dangerous wildlife on foot. It is part and parcel of the job. You'll see if you look really closely at the slide, there's a small rhino calf at the foot of this mother. So extremely dangerous situation for this ranger. In fact, as we speak, we have a ranger in hospital in Zimbabwe that was medevaced yesterday after being gored by a black rhino cow. So this is an incredibly dangerous situation, and we need to make sure that we prepare our rangers adequately for this. And this slide, I hope you can see, is a group of rangers on night patrol. You'll see they are armed. They're working in a park with rhino poaching incidents, and it was just to show we need to adequately prepare rangers for this. Night patrols in Big Five areas are no joke and require extensive training. We can't expect rangers to go out there and undertake these operations without the right training and without the right gear. Things like night vision, expensive, but it can become a game changer for rangers in these types of situations. But we need to make sure rangers are comfortable in terms of having the confidence to go out there and work in these areas. We're not going to shy away from the risks associated with the job, but we need to make sure that we're preparing our people adequately for the dangerous situations that they might face. The next section is around insurance and compensation for accident or injury at work. This is an area that the Game Rangers Association has been very active in the last 7 years. And here we talk about that rangers should have adequate insurance or social security in place for fatal or non-fatal occupational injuries, diseases, and work-related health risks. Really, really important. And this is about, rangers feeling protected when they're out there undertaking this dangerous work, that there is a safety net in place for them and for their families if something happens to them whilst they're carrying out their work for the environment. This slide is just to show a basic safety kit, something which should be carried by every ranger, depending on the areas of risk. But this is a very basic kit with some potentially life-saving, first aid equipment in it. Things like tourniquet, the chest seal, can save a life in these situations. And it's not always from a bullet; it can be from an animal bite or something like that. So it's really important that rangers have the right equipment. We've spoken about the training, but that they also have the right equipment to be able to do this. We can't expect rangers to be, stopping, excessive bleeding with shoelaces and rubber bands from bicycle tires, which we've seen in the past. It should be equipped with a thing like a tourniquet, which is a relatively low cost piece of gear, should be on every patrol that is undertaken in these situations where they may be needed. So when we talk about insurance, it's one thing having the safety net of the insurance, but it's another thing making sure that the rangers have the kit in those first few hours before any kind of medical evacuation can take place, that they have the right kit to be able to keep that ranger alive. Often when we talk insurance, we think of the medical evacuation aspect of it. Hugely important, but we've got to understand as well that that first few hours where unless you really your protected area is really close to an urban area or a big city, the likelihood of a medical evacuation team getting to the ranger within that first hour is extremely low in many areas, in many of these remote areas where rangers work. So we have to ensure that the protected areas themselves and the rangers themselves are equipped to at least be able to offer some assistance to those rangers in those critical golden hour, as they call it, after a catastrophic injury. Obviously, after that, things like medical evacuation can make a huge difference. In the incident that I spoke of earlier, this ranger was airlifted, taken to Harare from the park where he was injured by the rhino, and at least within a few hours is then in a situation when he can be put on life support and looked after by a professional medical team. Really, really important. And part of the insurance mechanism has to be the incident management. So, making sure that the right teams are deployed, that the right medical advice is given to the team on the ground. There's been major improvements in things like what they call things like telemedicine. So that's the ability to give medical advice over a phone, to the protected area and instruct them on what the necessary steps are until a response can arrive on the scene to assist the ranger. And then obviously, in the results of the ranger either, being injured where they cannot continue to do their physical work, or unfortunately, as we know, rangers do get killed in the line of duty, that there is protection for their family. We know that rangers are often the breadwinners, in family groups. Sometimes they're the only member of the family that have formal employment. So they are relied on by kids, by the elderly, by their spouses, and we need to ensure that there's adequate mechanisms in place to be able to provide some kind of financial assistance to those families. We know what doesn't ease the grief at all of losing your loved one, but at least it can offer them some kind of financial support to get through those initial months and years where there will be no income potentially. So really important that those mechanisms are in place. Ranger Protect itself is the insurance that we offer to our members. And by the end of June, we'll be offering that to over 6,000 rangers across Africa, with the idea to build that to 10,000 rangers within the next 4.5 years. It is a program that was pioneered by the GRAA about 7 years ago, and it, I think, has been incredibly supportive to rangers. Unfortunately, as I say, over the last 3 weeks, we've been inundated with claims from northern Mozambique, in particular, where we still have at least 2 rangers missing in action. We are, the teams on the ground are still actively trying to establish what's happened to them, but at least 4 rangers have been killed up there in the last 3 weeks due to these insurgencies that are taking place in a national park. And we hope that with mechanisms like Ranger Protect, at least we can offer some kind of assistance to them in these trying times. When we talk about labor inspection, it's really important to obviously, if you have some kind of standard, that you need to be checking on, how well is that standard being met, or what is do some kind of gap analysis of where support can be offered. And here we have a mechanism that we've been working on as GRAA. We've been working with different parks over the last 5 years, where we go into the parks and we run like a ranger support and needs assessment. We call it a parks assessment. And we're looking at rolling this out this year into more like a welfare orientated assessment, where we'll be working with those member organizations through an initiative called the Ranger Welfare and Standards Initiative, which is supported by Tusk and the Royal Foundation, where we'll be going into different parks and establishing where they are in terms of the welfare standards, and we'll be using obviously the global standards as part of that assessment. And the idea is not to, as a ranger association, it's not our role to critique or we're looking at trying to improve the standards. So we'll be working very much with those organizations of how we can improve the welfare standards. And we've set up a Ranger Leadership Council to assist us with that. So that's an exciting project, and we hope to be able to tell you a bit more about that at the African Ranger Congress in September. And then obviously when it comes to social security, rangers should really have the same social security schemes equivalent to other workers in the country, and specifically other workers, frontline workers, so those working in nursing, police, military kind of context. They should have at least the same kind of standards in terms of social security support across the board. So that's it from me. That was just an example of working with a team of rangers there. We were looking there at things like kit and first aid on the ground with this team up in Malawi. But really important to get out there onto the ground, work with the teams and understand where the deficiencies are and how we can help assist rangers, meet these standards. So thanks from my side, and look forward to hearing the questions.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, Borja. That was really interesting. I really appreciate that presentation. I think we had lots of good questions there, from competencies through to some of the points they made on insurance and how do we actually implement some of these standards. I'm just going to go back to start, if that's okay. One of the questions that came up there to Mike. Do we have standard tools for assessing these competencies, or do we need to create our own? And there's another question there about training of trainers as well, and how are we currently able to assess the quality of delivery?
Yeah, thanks for those questions. And the first question about tools for assessing the competencies, there isn't a standard tool yet, but I would like to make one. I have been working with other competencies frameworks on an app which can be used to guide us competence-based assessments, and it would not be that difficult for it to be made relevant to these competencies, especially since there aren't so many of them. So the answer is it's a really good idea. I think people would find it very useful. We're using it with other competencies frameworks, and we can look at doing that. Thanks.
Thanks, Mike.
The second question, please remind me. I can't see the chat.
It was around accreditation again, the certification of trainers, and that's obviously the IRF has been looking at. But I don't know if Mike, if there's more you want to discuss.
Yeah, it's very difficult to do that because of it requires, I mean, offering a certification process requires a really thorough and professional system of assessment and tracking that people who are certificated really are up to standard. We have been looking at it and various options. I think probably the pathway which might happen is more of a recognition of training providers rather than certification of individuals. But it's something we've been working on for some time, and we know is asked for by many people. So we'll have to work on that. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for that question. And the IRF, we're very conscious of that. We've created these standards, and now we're very much in a position where we want people to use these standards, implement them. And then it's about ensuring the quality is there, and also that your other question there around if there is a gap, you identify a gap in a competency. How do you fill that and find the right trainers to come and support that? So very very good questions. Mike, just one more before we go into the welfare side. There's a message here saying they agree with the need for training and safety for rangers, but I feel it could be a downside as well, where there could be a cycle of violence, for example, between rangers and poachers, because both of them use more violent and advanced equipment to keep up with each other. So the question there is really around, how do we mitigate against the increase in standards and training of the workforce, but ensuring that we don't end up going down into a militarization route, which isn't really what the competency standard framework is about.
Well, I'll say a few words, but Andrew might want to follow up on that as well. I mean, from my point of view, it's important to remember that an awful lot can be done in terms of training and planning to avoid confrontations happening in the first place through through activities to do with crime prevention, avoidance, intelligence gathering, and so on. So having trained personnel doesn't necessarily mean that they're just going to be better at dealing in violent confrontations. Actually, the training should help them avoid those violent confrontations to happen in the first place. So I don't think if the training is comprehensive that there's really a risk of an arms race. But I'll leave it to the experts. Andrew, you might have something wiser to say. Thanks.
No, Mike, I think that's an excellent point. People always, sort of when they think of training for, they think of, for those situations, I think of the firearm, and the use of lethal force and what we in South Africa we call Section 49. Yeah. But as you say, it's preparing a ranger in all aspects. So de-escalation, mitigating risk, these are key elements that should be, form part of any comprehensive training program. We also need to consider the reality. There's protected areas, as we say, where with militia groups operating within the parks. There's I guess the media has made it look like it's rangers versus poachers, but in many places in Africa, it's it's political instability, it's insurgencies into parks to provide those that are in control of militia groups with the natural resources in that park, whether it's gold, timber, cattle grazing. So it's a very nuanced and interesting part of preparing rangers to work in these areas. But it's, as you 100% say, it's not just about the firearms training. We've got to, though, if we expect rangers to work in these parks, we've got to prepare them to be able to defend themselves appropriately and to carry out the conservation work that they're expected to do. And part of that is about protecting the natural resources within those parks. So I think it's a good point.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, Mike, for that. Andrew, just while I've got you in, the last comment there was your last point was around insurance and the increased insurance to 6,000 and hopefully to 10,000 by the end of the year. There's a question around how do we contribute to ranger insurance in countries such as the DRC. So I don't know if you can just quickly give an overview of maybe some of the gaps that GRA, the Ranger Protect, has, and how they might be able to join if they are in a country that's part of the system, part of the scheme. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Yeah, I think it's an important point. Obviously, as we look at where insurance is possible across the continent, we know that the context that rangers operate in, as we've discussed, varies hugely. And so does the risk associated with these different conservation areas where they might work. The other factor to that is the cost of being able to do a medical extraction from different parks, and also the ability to actually have any kind of response. So that's something that we're dealing with at the moment, is there's certain areas where there's no medical response possible. Unfortunately, due to the remoteness and due to the lack of support infrastructure around these parks. And that's something that's, is not going to change, unfortunately, overnight. What we're looking at there is more like a insurance that might not offer the medical evacuation if it's not possible, but at least can look after widows and orphans in the event of a catastrophic incident. But the DRC, obviously many areas in the DRC are classified as extremely high risk. So it is an area that we're looking at closely. Other places up, like in W National Park between, Benin, Nigeria, those northern parts of Nigeria, also very volatile, South Sudan. So these what we call extreme risk areas. It is something that we're grappling with at the moment, but we're trying to find a solution for those areas as well.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. The Ranger Insurance was a direct ask on the HERE Ranger Declaration from the last Wild Ranger Congress. And it's so something that the IRF is taking up in its next action plan about how we can deliver a basic, even if it is a more basic insurance product than is currently offered by GRAA, but in a more universal way. So as Andrew said there, maybe it just covers loss of life or disability and injury at work, but doesn't cover the medical side. So we are looking at that. We do know how important that insurance piece is for rangers. Andrew and Borja, just a question here on equipment from, I think it's anonymous. Equipment should be appropriate and identified in consultation with rangers is the statement. What if the laws of the country don't allow this, or if the government thinks differently? So where the standards that we are trying to, or we recommend, might be in contrast or in conflict to local, national and subnational standards or governance. This is probably probably exists more around the firearms space, and so the type of equipment and training you may get there, that's probably where the biggest gap is. But yeah, Borja and Andrew, it'd be good to hear your thoughts on that, either examples or how to navigate that.
I start.
Please, Borja. Yeah.
Yeah, please.
Okay. Okay. So, like for us, what we do is like we organize ourselves, and then we create force the government to listen to us. We create consultations. We start doing campaigns on social media, and we create an opinion on the general public that allows us to press the lawmakers to allow us to use, like, for example, weapons.
Thanks. There, but yeah, Andrew.
Yeah, John, I'd say, in line with that, we understand that, the standard is an aspirational document, right? And that we've got to work closely with national governments, to change policies. I think that point is crucial. Who's going to understand the equipment required better than the rangers themselves? So they should be part and parcel of that conversation. And I think it's incumbent on us as the profession and those representing the profession to then have those discussions with, national authorities or decision makers in the country about what the requirements are, and to work. But we've got to work closely. It's part of the advocacy work, I guess, that we all do. We've got to work with the state role players and convince them that this is something really important.
Thank you, Andrew. Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think, we do have to operate within the rules of whatever the host nation is, absolutely. But there is, things we can do to make the point about what we're trying to achieve, and these standards help drive that conversation. That's very important. Chris, I'm not sure, Chris, are you there? Question here for you, kind of more broadly, on how can we address some of these challenges. So there's a question here from people. How can we address the challenges rangers are facing in the globe, since we are mostly NGOs, not the country governments?
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a lot of the reason why IRF exists, is to gather those voices. I think ranger associations are a good starting point. As Borka said, the idea is that rangers can gather to influence government, to provide feedback from the ground through to government. Rangers are the experts on the ground, and certainly we are looking at that sort of bottom-up approach from rangers, but certainly from a global perspective, the IRF is working downwards as well, developing these standards and so on, so that we can influence at a higher level, but also get that taken up at a regional and a national, subnational level as well. So we're sort of attacking this at both from two different sides, and hopefully, these webinars, these discussions, which hopefully are taken up by governments and fed through to them, these documents that are accepted globally, have global input in terms of best practice, etc., are taken up, and that leads to the influence. There's a lot of other areas that we're working at as well. Obviously, in terms of the work with the International Labour Organization, getting the profession registered, and so on. That's going to take a long time, but those are other areas that we can influence, aligning ourselves with global targets that we've done, the 30 by 30 targets, and then placing rangers centrally in that, and making sure that policymakers understand that without the investment into the ranger sector, the ability to affect and reach those targets becomes more and more difficult. So yeah, try and check this from many different angles, and I think these sort of documents, these tools that have been developed, are a really good starting point to advocate for greater investment and more support for rangers.
Thanks, Chris. Just a quick follow-up question that just popped up there, and we're seeing a few questions come through around certification, accreditation, and the actual delivery of training here. But there's just two questions, and I'll do the last one first. It'd be good to start training the park rangers virtually. This training was given, if this training could be given by the IRF, especially for new park rangers. Now, there are some materials out there, the Code of Conduct, for instance. There are a couple of MOOCs, these massive open online courses, which are available, but not run specifically by the IRF. Chris, is there anything you want to just add to that, or just around the training side and how the IRF could and should deliver?
Yeah, I think from our perspective, it's not, we are not trainers. That's not our role. Our role is to influence those that are carrying out training. If you think of the logistics in terms of the requirements globally, yes, we can run this kind of training, educating people in terms of the standards and so on. But it's for those, the actual ranger trainers, to go and implement these as well. So yeah, it's not our role to carry out specific ranger training, so to speak. We can facilitate different training between different experts, and we see that, as Borka was saying, ranger to ranger training, that's taking place. So yeah, that's the kind of work that we do. But Certainly, what we, in terms of our role of professionalization of the workforce, it is to ensure that that there is quality training taking place that is aligned to global standards, and at the end of the day, that this is having an impact on rangers and the profession at large. So that's our role, rather than carrying out specific ranger training. And as I said, the logistics of it, working across the world, different languages, etc. It's easy. It's better for us to work with our regional associations, and then with the regional associations to work with their relevant experts and national, subnational associations to deliver on that. Andrew?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Andrew, have you got something you want to add to that?
Yeah, just to give an example of using the competency framework. So as GRAA, what we've done there is we've got a sort of standardized approach to ranger training now that we've been working on with ranger trainers. And the idea is that can help guide the industry around the approach to training, because we know there's one thing we've got to have the competency standards, so what is expected of rangers, and we've linked those into the approach to training as well. And just like Chris says, as a regional association, we don't see ourselves as trainers, but we want to try and influence the standard of training by sort of correcting the approach to training across the training group.
Thanks, Andrew. Just a few more questions coming through. So we'll answer a couple more before we go to some closing comments. One here, and this is really open to, I say, Chris and Mike, and anybody else who actually wants to answer this. And might Andrew, come on to your piece around that parks and that assurance list you're doing. Do you envisage these standards becoming a form of certification for ranger employers to highlight those who are meeting best practice standards, to showcase these employers to potential funders? I'm thinking in terms of like the IUCN green list, for example. Andrew, I don't know if you want to just quickly talk about what you're doing directly and seeing how that links, and then Chris, if you want to come in.
Yeah, I think that is, that's something that's been considered with any types of, assessment is, what are we trying to achieve here? Are we trying to, certify that parks are, achieving the standard, or are we trying to just improve the standard at park level? I think the first case is working on what we call like a gap analysis, right? And working on a support plan with the park itself to achieve a better standard. I think phase 2 would then be looking at, is there merit in having like a green list, type, ranger green list, ranger support green list type, level of which parks can aim at. But I think, in my mind, that's sort of phase 2 to the what we're doing. The initial assessments around welfare will be directed very much in terms of just trying to support what's there already and working towards an improved standard.
Thanks, Andrew. Chris, anything you want to add to that?
Well, I think Mike might be well placed in terms of that as well. So, Mike, if you want to go.
Thanks very much. It's a question we get asked a lot. I mean, firstly, one of the documents which has been produced by IRF and IRSA is called the Ranger Assurance Checklist, which is just a list of like 10 aspects of ranger work that we're asking all employers, donors, governments to look at, basically just to check that how are they doing against those 10 points. And I think that's probably available on the IRF website as well. But it's not a certification system, but basically it's a checklist of sort of 10 things which really ought to be in place if a proper ranger system is in position. So I point you towards that, and that was designed to be quite simple, so it could be shown to governments or employers and donors, saying the IRF says that these 10 things, you really need to be sure these 10 things are being taken care of. As far as wider certification goes, as said before, it is complex, and we are looking at linked to what Andrew said, is again some global guidance and a global standard on what good professional ranger training looks like. It's very hard for us to produce a sort of universal training course that is applicable to an urban ranger in New York, and equally to a patrol ranger doing anti-poaching work in Laos. But what we can do is set out what good training looks like and what should be expected of training providers, so that they can work to be in some compliance in line with the recommendations of the IRF. And also, it's important that we continue, and IRF is doing a huge amount on this, to keep pushing these ideas with the big donors and funders and with the international conventions. Because the idea is to get these approaches mainstreamed, hardwired into global policy on conservation, so that the people whose job it is to implement global policy through governments are obliged to take note of them. So as well as working from the ground up, we're also trying to work from the top down. It's a long road, but huge progress has been made in the last 5 years. And thanks to all of you, your patience in waiting for all these things to be put in place. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate that. There's just a couple of questions which I'm going to, if it's okay, I'm going to hand directly to individuals to speak to that person directly. One's around the use of or the ability to have weapons, and then the other one is on ranger insurance. So I'm just going to pass those straight on to Borja and to Andrew separately, and they can be in touch if that's okay. There's just one question just coming through. Sorry, give me 1 second. And that question as well, I'm going to pass directly on, just conscious of time. So I'll hand over to Chris. So before that, I just want to say thank you very much for all the questions, really engaging, really helpful. And like I said, those last three I haven't forgotten about. I will make sure they are passed on directly to someone to reply to. But Chris, thank you. And for your closing remarks, please.
Thank you, John. Firstly, just a big thank you to Mike for his presentation and his time, to Andrew and Borja for their contribution from the regions. It's always good to hear directly from the regions and from the field. So a big thank you to them for their time and also just the work that they're doing with rangers. Thank you to the IRF team for helping and set this up, and to the translators as well. Really valuable having so many languages that we can offer to present this in. So yeah, just finally, thank you to everyone for participating in the questions. Hopefully this has given you some insight into why the standards are so important, also how these tools can be used by yourself, but also take them through to employers. And then, as Mike said, the role that these standards play in putting them into policy, global policy documents, is really, really important. And we've seen that. We've seen it being put into some big funding opportunities where there are certain standards that have been written in, that have been developed, that have come through from IRF and with the support of URSA. So it's really fantastic to see this gaining momentum. But it also starts at the ranger level, and that's why it would be great to hear more feedback from the rangers themselves, and also ranger trainers who are using some of these tools to give us feedback. Let us know if it's working, and also, just as some of the questions have raised and have been identified, there's lots of work to be done. There's still lots of gaps. And those are things that certainly from RF, we want to take forward and address them, and we need to. Things very challenging ones, we've been talking about them for many years, is the whole thing around certification and accreditation. the challenges then. How do we deal with that? How do we address the needs out there? In terms of assessments, what are the best assessments to ensure that what we are putting forward are being utilized, but also that they're driving quality and improvements for the ranger, and also related to the outcomes that we want. So I think these are fantastic opportunities to present all of this. It's great to have feedback, and hopefully this can be shared with, as I mentioned right at the beginning, that you share this with other rangers and other, through ranger associations as well. I think it's a great opportunity. And then also, please provide us feedback. It's always great to hear back. So just on that note again, thanks very much to everyone. This is, as I said, really important in terms of ensuring that we look at rangers' rights being respected out in the field, and that we grow the profession for rangers, reduce risk, and at the end of the day, let's hear those stories. Particularly, we've got the role of honor coming up, where we recognize those rangers that have fallen, and we're also obviously looking to ensure that we recognize the sacrifice that people have made in the line of duty. So if you can, let us know, give us feedback, keep communicating, and we will be driving some of the ideas that you've given us here, and we'll take those forward too. So once again, thanks everyone, and hopefully we'll see you soon.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, everyone. Just so everyone's aware, the recordings of these is on our Facebook channel, and also will be available later on our YouTube channel as well. So please do share for people who weren't able to make this or any of the other webinars that we've hosted. And as Chris said, it's about getting the message out there, getting these standards out there and getting them used. So thank you all very much. I really appreciate everyone's time. I'm looking forward to seeing you all soon. Thank you.
Thanks everyone.
Thanks everyone.
Bye.
Yeah, goodbye.